There are some things in the Bible that I've been given understanding on. Yes, my hair is all messed up. Yeah, I just woke up. Who cares? I'll probably look pretty rough. I don't give a crap. Okay. Jacob's trouble. How does this come about? Yeah, my videos are not all put together. Okay, I've tried to make... I'm not good at this, right? I'm not good at making videos. I don't know anything about editing. And sometimes I try to make these videos about certain biblical subjects. And what happens is... Okay, I'm autistic. I have bad ADHD. What else? I don't know. There's a list. I have a hard time staying focused on the subject that I'm talking about. So, like, trying to make these kinds of videos, I want to say so many things. Like, whenever I'm talking to people in my vicinity about these things, they're sitting there with sparks flying out the side of their head. They can't take it all in. I feel like an alien on this planet. And they try to get away from me when I'm like hyper focused on this kind of stuff. But Jacob's trouble, right? Okay, Jesus said he'll tear down the second temple and rebuild it in 3 days. And everybody's like, he never done that, you know? But he did. Because God's plan at that time was... See, here's another... There's so many things I could touch on here on just this subject. I don't know if I could do it in one video. But, okay, where to start? Okay. Okay. Everybody is shouting for Israel right now. Like physical Israel, not the spiritual Israel. You know, yay for Israel, yay for Israel. Yes, bless Israel. But here's the thing. They are Antichrist. They do not believe in Yeshua. They are not God's people. There are hints all in the Bible. For instance, here's some hints. When the Pharisees came to John the Baptist, and he said, "Brood of vipers, who have warned you to flee from the time to come?" He said, "Say not to yourselves, ye are sons of Abraham, because God can raise up these stones as sons of Abraham." In Isaiah, when they kept turning from God, he told them he would go to a nation. He said, "I will provoke you to jealousy. I will go to a nation you know not, and a tongue you do not understand." He talked about those who had never bowed the knee to Baal. You know, they talk about Jesus being the light to the Gentiles. And most of the Gentiles had read these prophecies about Yeshua. And see, it wasn't just the Jews that got prophecies about the coming of Jesus. If you read in ancient history, the Oracle of Delphi had even prophesied about the coming of a king whose people rejected him. Isaiah prophesied the suffering servant. I mean, there were other prophecies about him. The Zoroastrianists, which were the Magi, the wise men in the Bible, they even knew of his coming. And they come looking for him. These were non-Jew. These were non-Israelite. Non-Hebrew. And see, all these people want to seal up the Christian religion, Judaism, and all that up into a ball, like there's you and then there's us, but God loves all of us. So John the Baptist knew this. Jesus knew this. When he said, the Samaritan woman, she said, she was talking about worshiping God in the temple, but the Jews wouldn't let them, or the Israelites. I'm not for sure if they were actually considered Jews at that time, but anyway, yeah, I think they were. But yeah, they were, of course. Yeah, Judah. But anyway, and in Revelation, when it talks about the end of oblations, these preachers today, they talk about this 7-year period when tribulation and great tribulation, everything gets crazy, and then Jesus takes us up before all the trouble comes. That's not the way this is going down. I'm sorry to tell you. That's not the way this is going down. See, Jacob's trouble is going to happen because they try to build the third temple. What I mean by that is this red heifer sacrifice that you've just seen happen on the news and all over the internet. See, because the Jews didn't have a second temple anymore, Jesus said, I'll tear down that temple and rebuild it in 3 days, and he did. And what he meant by that, the temple itself meant the way you worship God. It will no longer be oblation, which is the sacrifice in the temple and all this stuff. Because now your sweet smell and savor is your acts of, your sacrifices to God, your crucifixion of the flesh, your good deeds you do towards each other. The 2 main commandments Jesus told you about: love God, love man. Do well. And pretty much he was saying, if you do those 2 things, you have all of the law covered. And see, in the Old Testament, when God was doing more than one thing, when he had the Israelites do these sacrifices in the temple and show them all of these laws, because he knew not one man other than Yeshua could actually know how to obey all of that law. And Yeshua came down with the wisdom to understand what God was saying. He was telling people, if you do these 2 things, you have the law. And it was a good heart towards God, is what he was meaning by that. Like, if you love God, if you're loving him, you'll also love everybody else. And love covers a multitude of sin. But back to the third temple. See, the third temple was already built here. He said, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And in the Passover, the lamb's blood over the doorpost. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Your third temple is here. And when he comes back, it talks about New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, right in the place of the old. This is your third temple. Your third temple is when Jesus comes back, not one that man builds on earth. So this third temple that Jews want to make is them trying to bring back sacrifice that God did away with. He brought Jesus. Jesus died on the cross, rose again. He rebuilt the third temple. There was no need for the second temple anymore. In 70 AD, he let it be destroyed. In Ezekiel, he talks about seeing the presence of God leaving out the east side of the temple. There was even a part where he starts saying, I do not delight in your bulls and your rams and all this stuff. He was done with it already then. So, you'd have to have a wide knowledge of biblical literature to be able to pick up on all these things. See, in Revelation, it specifically says a synagogue, not a church, not a mosque, a synagogue. Okay, they want to build the synagogue of Satan on the Temple Mount. So because they do not worship Jesus, they worship anything. They do not submit to Yeshua. So the Jews today are those who say they are Jews and are not. And what do I mean by this? In Romans, it says a Jew is a man whose heart is circumcised for the Lord. That specifically excludes anyone who does not submit to God's will through Jesus, who was the once and for all sacrifice. Now, if God wanted you to still know where the Ark of the Covenant was, and if He still wanted you to have a second temple, you would still have it. And Jesus prophesied the tearing down of the temple, not one stone left upon another. And the reason there was not one stone left upon another is because that temple was covered in gold, and when it burnt, the liquid gold went down into the rock. They flipped over every stone to get the gold out. Okay? So here's what happens, right? The Jews do this red heifer sacrifice. The Muslims know exactly what that means. Because they did not have a second temple to do sacrifice, they had to do a red heifer sacrifice to cleanse their hands and make them clean. Because the Jews, if they are not clean, they cannot enter to the Temple Mount. They cannot go and tear down the Alaska Mosque and build the third temple. This is what's getting ready to happen. You're going to see something happen where the temple gets torn down, or the Alaska Mosque gets torn down either by war or some kind of event, and then they start trying to build this third temple. Let me pause a minute. Okay, so here's what happens. This is when the Great War will happen. So, Israel wanted to build the third temple, but they cannot enter the Temple Mount without their hands being clean. Because in Leviticus, if you read Leviticus, if they had touched dead bodies, if they had done this and done that, their hands were considered clean and they could not even enter the gates. They had to stay outside of the place for so many days. They had all these processes they had to do to consider themselves clean to enter the tent. So that was them having a temple at that time. They still go by these laws today because they go by the book and not by the Spirit. Okay. So here's the thing. They needed a red heifer sacrifice. It was prophesied, They finally found solid red heifers and they did these sacrifices. Now the Jews consider themselves clean to enter the Temple Mount. This is why the Alaska Mosque has stood as long as it has. Now that they've done this red heifer sacrifice, the next thing you'll see is them working to tear down that mosque. There will come a time when you notice everybody that's normally at the Dome of the Rock suddenly disappearing. And it'll even be on the news, I about guarantee it. Like, why are the guards not at the Temple Mount? Why is there no one, guarding the Temple Mount? And it will be a government agenda to get all their people out, and they will blow it up or something of that nature. And then they will start fighting harder against the Muslims, and they will try to build this third temple. And it calls this temple in Revelation the synagogue of Satan. Specifically a synagogue, not a mosque, not anything other than a synagogue. So it'll be built by the Jews. And it will be a synagogue. They will build this third temple, and they will try to do sacrifice all over again, which is not permitted by God. It's prophesied that they would do these things, but the end of oblation in Revelation is when Jesus died on the cross once and for all. That was the end of oblation. That was no more temple sacrifice. You didn't need it no more. You don't even need a building anymore. So they want to continue doing it the old way. They want to disobey God, refuse his son, which makes them Antichrist, and they want to do the old way of sacrifice. When they tear down this Al-Aqsa mosque, the Muslims know their religion. They know the Judaic religion. They understand what the red heifer sacrifice means, and that's why you're seeing all this ramped up war right now. They don't want that Temple Mount torn down, and all of this war goes back to the Dome of the Rock. This is where the Muslims believe Muhammad flew on a carpet and saw heaven and all this, but this is also where Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, and that's where their religion started. And see, Abraham, when he went into Hagar and he had Ishmael, Abraham's seed was blessed by God, which means he fumbled a blessing. It's almost like God said, here's a machine gun, don't kill no one. You can shoot pop cans. But Abraham went and shot somebody instead. You know what I mean? And the way things work in the Bible, like when Abraham made that one mistake and didn't wait on God, and he listened to Sarah and went into Hagar to give him a son instead of waiting for God to give him a son, he gave birth to two children who both were blessed but in different ways. And see, rabbinical Judaism and Islam started in around the 5th century. So the Jews and the Muslims kind of mirror each other. The story of Jacob and Esau, you know, it always boils down to two sons. The story repeats itself over and over throughout the Bible. So both of these sons were blessed. Hagar was about to put Ishmael under a tree stump and let him die, and was crying, and the angel came and told her that he would be the father of many kings and all this stuff, because he was also blessed and God doesn't lie. And they also have children like the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. And they war against each other over the same rock. But they both are lost children. They do not submit to Yeshua. Like I said, Romans says the true Jew is the man whose heart is circumcised for the Lord. Well, if the Lord says, I don't want you to do this sacrifice in this temple anymore, hear my son Yeshua, and they refuse, they crucified him, and all of that, that's what you're supposed to do. And if you refuse his son, you have refused God himself. Jesus said, no man goes to the Father except by me. So Jews and the Muslims are a lost people. Just like John the Baptist said, who have warned you from the wrath to come? Because they were showing up there at a baptism. John the Baptist knew they weren't coming to be baptized by him. He was kind of being a smart aleck to them, because he knew they were an enemy to the gospel. He knew. So, in the next little while, something will happen. Either a bomb will hit it or something of that nature, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be torn down, and the Jews will start ramping up their war efforts and dragging America into it also to fight against the Muslims in order to hold them back while they try to build this temple. When that temple is built, if you pick up the pages of Revelation, there's only like 3 pages left. We are closer than what people want to believe. We are so much closer to the coming of Yeshua. It is unreal, and people really think they got all this time. You don't. You don't. We are so much closer than people believe. And I see a lot of these preachers trying to prophesy according to our time, 2026. You cannot do that. You have to go by the Hebraic calendar. Because all the old prophets, their time scales were based off of Hebraic calendar. Their year scale was different. They did not have daylight savings time. There was a lot of things different about the way they did time than what we do now. Like, to the Jews, I think it's 7,580. I can't remember. I didn't clock it before I made this video, but we are 2026, and our time was based off of Constantine. Constantine is overglorified, but the Romans during that time, they were... There's a lot I could say about that. Rome has a big part from the beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible. And I could do a whole nother video on that, because they are the ones who changed time, seasons, months, and years. They are the ones who called all these pagan holidays to Jesus, when... Okay, back to what I was saying. The Romans are the ones who changed times, months, seasons, and years. And see, when it talks about in Revelation, Pergamos being the seat of Satan's power, the heir of Pergamos in those times had no... Or the ruler of Pergamos in those times had no heir, and he bequeathed Pergamos to the Republic of Rome. Okay, so Ptolemy plays a big part in the Bible more than people realize. Because, okay, one day, when I pray, I just kind of go about doing things, keeping my hands busy. And I talk to God, and then, I catch hints of things, and then not long back, they found the actual burial place of Alexander the Great. Well, all of a sudden a bell went off in my head. I'm like, wait a minute, Alexander the Great was in the book of Revelation. Or not book of Revelation, but the book of Daniel. When it talks about Medo-Persia, see, Alexander the Great conquered all of Asia Minor, which is where all the 7 churches of Revelation are. It's where, I can't remember his name. He was a martyr. It specifically references this martyr who was put in a bronze bull and burned. Or maybe he was boiled, I can't remember. Anyway, Asia Minor plays a big part, right? This is where the 4 horsemen are. Everybody acts like the 4 horsemen are things to come now. But just like the story of Abraham, Abraham made that one mistake going into Hagar. And because he didn't listen to God, it caused all these wars between the Muslims and the Jews. It was a little pebble dropped into the ocean, and by the time that little ripple reached the other side of the ocean, it became a big tsunami. That's the way a lot of things in the Bible work. Just like I'm saying, the 4 horsemen came after Alexander the Great. When it talks about the 4 horsemen in Revelation, they all wear a crown. They're all on horse. If you do any studies about infantry and the art of war from the most ancient times, the only ones who rode on horses were generals, kings, princes. But this specifically says these have crowns. These were kings. And see, the 4 generals that succeeded Alexander the Great all became kings after that. And Asia Minor was split into 4 parts. And these kings went to war against one another, trying to claim all of what Alexander the Great had conquered. And so they assimilated large groups of people as slave soldiers, and, they kidnapped their women and all this other stuff. Well, this was when the color, the languages, the gods they served, and all of this stuff actually commingled, and things become what they are today. And see, a whole lot of the Arab nation consists of these people that came from that situation. And see, in the book of Revelation, it gives off the colors of these horses, which are symbolic. And see, the Arab nation flags are all green, red, white, and black. Same colors as the 4 horsemen. So the 4 horsemen already came back then. But what happens from then on to now is another pebble dropped in the ocean that becomes a tsunami in our time. You see what I'm saying? Like, just like how Cain killed Abel, and from then on, murder and death covered the earth. That term, slippery slope, once things start, it's hard to stop it. But Jacob's trouble comes when they try to tear down this Al-Aqsa Mosque. If you look at the maps of today and compare it to all the nations it says comes after Israel in those times, the names were different in the ancient times, but if you compare old maps to new maps, you find out it's like most of northern Africa. It's all the places today where the Islamic nations are that will try to come after Israel. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're getting ready to see all of that. Like right now, it is little wars here and there, wars and rumors of wars. But when this one certain thing happens, they're going to ramp up their efforts and come against Israel. I don't have all the details on this, but this is what I see. This is what I see, is exactly what I just told you. And the rest of the book of Revelation. See, Revelation is kind of an odd book. You have to compare different books of the Bible. The book of Enoch even has clues about the end times of what's going to happen, right? And when I mention Rome, what I mean by that is it talks about them changing times, months, seasons, and years. And in the book of Enoch, it even mentions this, and it says that they do err by doing this. So, like, to this day, America and most of the places in the world, they celebrate these solstice days, which are mostly celebrated by the pagans. The Catholic Church did most of this. They made what used to be Saturnalia, which was the worship of Saturn. The word Saturn also is Satyr, Satan. And how nice is it that the Sabbath day got switched to Sunday, and Saturday, which is actually Sabbath day, got named after Saturn. And if you really read the Hebrew versions of the Bible, Satan was not actually an angel, but a son of man and angel. Because it calls him Hallel ben Shahar, which means son of the morning star. A morning star is a type of angel. And if you read stories like the Titanomaci, I think it was Greece or somewhere around there where that story comes from, it's the same story, except Cronus, you could call this morning star. And then Zeus, being his son, would be Satan. And it says the seat of Satan's power is in Pergamos, which is where one of the biggest altars to Zeus was ever created. It got moved to Germany, I think the same exact year that Hitler was born. Weird, huh? It's in the Berlin Museum to this day. If you look at the bust that surrounds it, it's a war between man, angel, half man beings. And all through there's a serpent that's just slithering through the war. Crazy. That's odd, ain't it? Yeah, people are like trying to compare the Bible to what's on the earth, and they're like, it don't line up, but it lines up. And see, in the earliest parts of the world, there wasn't that many people on the earth, and everybody just, all they had was the stories that were passed down. So some of the details changed, but they're basically the same story. The flood story, the Titans, which would also be the Nephilim. These were, and the story of Zeus, like he turned into different things and had children with all these women, and they were all becoming like half this and half that. And in Samaria, all over their walls, and in Egypt, they have these inscriptions of these beings with dog heads and eagle heads and all this other stuff. And they messed with DNA. There were things going on. We think they were dumb back then, but in a lot of ways, they were smarter than us because they were more in tune with spiritual things, but they also had a knowledge of things that we do today and we struggle at. I could go on forever on this stuff. Like all the stuff that I've figured out, and Jesus said the end times will be as in the days of Noah. Well, in the story of the Titans, they have this big war. They all go against one another. The Titans versus the gods and all this stuff. The book of Enoch tells basically the same story. It talks about up to the flood, one of the angels dropped a sword amongst these Nephilim and these false gods that they would war against one another. And so this war is happening, right? Everybody's distracted over here. And when it says that God gives them a sword to do this or to do that, it's almost like if you said you gave a dog a sword to kill every cat. It doesn't know why. It just wants to kill every cat. That's kind of what that means. Like, if God gives someone a sword in the Bible, no matter what, that's what they're going to do. It said God sent an angel to put a sword amongst them that they would do war against one another. Well, it's almost like they're being distracted over here while Noah goes into the ark and then the flood comes. In our time today, that's what you're seeing. There's all these wars, there's all this stuff on the news, all these Christians are focused on that over here, but they're not believing God when they do that. Like, this is why I say, do not get involved in politics. If you're a Christian, don't get involved in politics. You're putting your faith in a man who is the 1%, who ain't never been broke down on the side of the road with a flat tire. He's never had to strike a lick at work a day in his life or any of this crap. But for some reason, we believe that this guy has the answers for us poor people down here. No, don't work that way. You take some broke fool out of a garden, striking a lick, and put him up there doing that. I bet you make better decisions for us people down here than he ever would some rich dude born with a silver spoon in his butt. You're being deceived. Jesus said, give what is Caesar's unto Caesar, meaning like, you know what, let them do that over there. Be about your Father's business. Be about your Father's business. Have faith in Him. God gets the mic drop at the end of the day. Politics, no war is going to do anything that God couldn't do better. No president, no king, no nothing. Some of these things are prophesied to happen, but God wants you to focus on Him. And Satan tries to rule by fear. That's not of God. Politics generates fear, the news, all this stuff. It's fear-based. It's a fear-based religion. Any Christianity sect that is sitting there like, oh, the president, that's all. You know what? You're losing the fight already. You don't have your faith in the right place. You're going up there voting like your life depends on it. I don't vote. I'm not getting involved. Not Democrat, not Republican, not any of it. These things are prophesied to happen, and they will happen. But you need to realign yourself with God and have your faith where it should be. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat up in the White House. If you're praying, God will sway the hearts of kings, just like it says. God used a pagan king to help the Jews build, or the Israelites build the second temple. Everybody's subject unto God. Anyway, in the Titanomaci, these half beings and so-called gods, they warred against one another over territories, over supplies, all this stuff, just like it talks about in the Titanomaci. The gods versus the Titans. In the Mesopotamian flood story, which is the epic of Gilgamesh, or the deluge, it calls Noah Zil-Sudra, and anyway, it tells the same kind of story. The gods sent down this half being to fight Gilgamesh, but they end up going up against this ogre called Humbabas to rule over the cedar forest, which I think the name of that forest, Lebanon, means the heart of God. Lebanon was well known from ancient times. This is where everybody got their cedar. It was in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was in the Bible. It's in a lot of ancient literature, that specific place. Anyway, there's very few pages of the Bible left after you get to that point where the third temple is being built. And see, it talks about the two witnesses that arise up in the end of time, which I believe are Enoch and Elijah, because Jesus said it's appointed every man once to die and then the judgment. Okay, so two men have not died on earth as of yet, which is Enoch and Elijah, because they were taken up. And so in the last days, and here's the thing, another thing that points to Israel not being a good thing in the eyes of God in the end times, is the fact that in Revelation, when the two witnesses are killed and they lay in the street 2 days, three and a half days, I think, God calls them up and their bodies are pulled up to heaven. But it says, This will happen in what is known as spiritual Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. So this happens in Israel, where it talks about these people and this thing that happens. And if God is calling, if it's calling Israel spiritual Sodom and Egypt, that's not looking at Israel that we know of today in a good light. That's meaning they're a polluted place. And it talks about all the people for this great city and all this stuff. There's something people are missing here. You know what I mean? They're not reading their Bible. They read that part and they're like, I wonder what that means. It means exactly what it means. It means exactly what it means. It means exactly what it says. Anyway, I'm not good at putting together these videos. I get ideas and I put things together and then I don't know where to send them. God gives me, this has been a course of years where I've been like studying this stuff and putting stuff together, and in times when I was unsure, and then I get another hint here and there. But the 4 horsemen have already happened. The effects of what happened. See, if you notice in the Bible, certain things will happen in time, and it's like a sign that says, this happened now. So the things that come with this will begin to take place. Just like Jesus was crucified now, the things after Jesus will begin to take place. It's a symbol of a time when a certain event starts. Okay, so the cross, you can call that the beginning of the end of oblations, which means no more temple sacrifice permitted by God. He was doing away with the second temple, just like Jesus said. Jesus became the one for all sacrifice. He is the Mashiach. No matter what you say, he is. You'd be blind not to see it. Okay, Jesus comes, dies on the cross, resurrected. The temple gets torn down and nobody can find the real Ark of the Covenant. It's because it's not needed anymore. You don't need the Ark to be the presence of God anymore. Because if I go not away, the Comforter cannot come. Jesus said that. He had to finish what he started in order for him to go and prepare this place for us, and so that the Comforter would come. There was a plan there. The temple became in your heart and no longer in a building. They want you to believe you have to be in a building to worship God. Like, you can worship God anywhere you're at. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You get down at a tree stump anywhere you want, you can worship God now. Because we're getting in times where Satan infiltrates the church, and you think because you're in a building that says church on it that you are doing the right thing and all that. That's what they want you to believe. Go up in there and say, just go up in there, I'm saved, get baptized, go about your business, and try to live this stifled life where you're holding your breath all the time. That's not what I read about in the Bible. I read about liberty, and whom the Lord sets free is free indeed, and all this stuff. Like, religion, here's the thing. Here's how you can tell the difference between religion and faith. Religion tries to prove it. Faith just is. For instance, when I talk to God, and when I get really on a good level with him, it's like specific that I be authentic, that I don't try to be like the church. Like, be yourself. You're free to be you. His Spirit will guide you away from all the sin. Like, when I set my heart on Him, He took away all the drug addictions. I still smoke cigarettes, but I think He knows I can deal with that one. And when I set my heart to it, I know He's going to help me do it. He's going to help me stop smoking. And I do plan on quitting smoking. I hate that I ever smoked. I come up in a generation where it wasn't looked at so harshly like it is today, and it was nothing for your parent to be like, Eric, light me a cigarette. So then I'd pick up a cigarette, light it up for her, hand it to her. But then when they catch me smoking, I'm grounded and threaten to make me eat a box of cigarettes and all kinds of craziness. They're like, how does that make sense? But anyway, like, so you're going to make me eat nicotine because I smoked nicotine? Parents back in those days were buffoons. Like, I'm sure a lot of you born 85 and back can vouch for that one. Craziness. Anyway, any of these scriptures that I mentioned here, if you get in the Bible and you read enough of the Bible, and some of you have read enough of the Bible, but maybe you didn't look through archaeology, maybe you didn't look through some of the things I looked through, but now that I've mentioned these things, like as far as the story of Alexander the Great, his 4 generals, the wars that happened after that, watch a documentary about that, and then read the book of Daniel and read the book of Revelation. You will see that a whole lot of what I'm saying is in ancient history as known facts. But I've never seen anybody take those 2 things and put it together into one story. The whole thing about Medo-Persia, the 4 horsemen, the 4 generals after Alexander the Great. Like the day when I heard that, about Alexander the Great's tomb actually being found, I was like, ding. That was like Holy Spirit tapping me on the shoulder. Like, here's another one. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. So then I went like hyper-focus mode. Like, laser focus, started searching up all this stuff. And it wasn't just like one book and one documentary. This was like different scriptures all through the Bible that pointed to these same details. Just like the whole thing about the Titanomaci. Like, I read a lot of stuff about other religions, their belief systems, their rites and rituals. And what you get from all of this is there's similarities in certain parts. Like, just little small hints. And whenever you put it all together, it paints a picture. And it paints a picture that says the Bible is true. Like, everywhere I look, it proves the Bible. And I think God made me this way for a reason. I come out here and sit in my truck. Like, I haven't even turned this thing on. It's starting to heat up outside. I am burnt up. My hair's like... I haven't taken a shower this morning, so I got bedhead. I don't care, man. I ain't trying to be gorgeous for no one these days. Anyway, I hope somebody gets something from this. I mean, there are some people, scholars and things, that I've heard say some of this stuff, but there's other things that I've noticed they don't mention, and I wonder why. And for the longest time, I would not mention them because I thought they're the scholars. Like, why aren't they talking about this? But then again, I feel like if I don't pose the idea and no one picks up on these details, how will it ever get known? Like, is there someone out there who has actually found the same details? Is there someone out there who, maybe there is, maybe there ain't, but I feel the need to put these out here. Somebody will see them. One man mentioned to me, like, why did God pick Noah? They mentioned the fact, they tried to say he was an alcoholic, Like, dude, if God put that kind of job on your back to repopulate the whole of mankind, and then all this traumatic crap happened, it'd be hard not to drink, don't you think? But but anyway, all that on one man's shoulders to rebuild the whole of mankind, to build this ark, to see this flood happen, to like hope and pray on God that everything goes right. But the reason Noah was picked is because the fallen angels had polluted like the majority of all of mankind. And if they weren't polluted in their blood, they were not righteous people. Noah was righteous, and his generations were clean. He did not have Nephilim blood anywhere in his generations. God used Noah, not just because he's righteous, but also because he didn't pollute his DNA. And the invasion of the Nephilim on the earth was just like the days of Herod when he tried to kill all the kids so that the king of the Jews would not be born. This was another attempt earlier in history. This was an attempt to pollute all the blood of mankind so the line of David would not come to exist. Because the Nephilim have no covenant with God. They were abominations. They were not meant to be born. It even goes on there to say that when they died on the earth, they didn't go to Abraham's bosom. They didn't go anywhere. They stayed on the earth as known as demons and evil spirits. So, I mean, God had no covenant with them. If the angels polluted all the blood of mankind, not one of those would be fit in God's eyes to carry the line of David, which would lead to Yeshua. So there you go. Now, what I want people to do, if they watch this or hear these details, check in the Bible about this stuff. Check the books I'm talking about. Like, check the stories I'm talking about. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But there's a lot of things in here I'm right about. And I want to jog people's brains to look into this stuff because someone out there has more details than I do. And these details could be the puzzle pieces that fit in between other people's discovered knowledge and wisdom. And I would like to get feedback or see other videos. Maybe this will go somewhere. Hopefully it does. I'm not good at putting videos together. I kind of just wing it. I don't know nothing about editing videos. I'm not good at organizing my details because I get so much it tries to come out and I'm trying to slow myself down and do it that's the reason I take so many pauses in between things I say, because if I just started doing like I do people when I get talking about these things, they're not interested at all. They're sitting there with sparks flying out their ears and they're like, Eric, I can't do the autism right now. I can't deal with the whole, the whole information dump. Nobody can deal with it. They think I'm speaking Chinese or something. So, I know better than to try to talk to people that ain't interested in this kind of stuff. And everybody's told me I should make a channel and start making these videos, but I'm sitting there yeah, but God, I'm not good at doing this. I'm not, you know what I mean? I don't really have a lot of confidence in myself as far as technology goes. And being organized about subjects. So I trail off on different subjects. I'm bad for that, man. People will come talking to me about stuff and they'll bring up a subject that I'm super focused on, and then I just go off on it. Blah, 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 blah. And they're sitting there trying to get away. I think my mom's calling, you know what I mean? And I totally don't pick up on it. People around me have to be like, Eric, they're trying to leave, man. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, hope somebody gets something from this.